Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show.
What an exciting guest I have for you all today. Her name is Adele Stickland, and she comes to us from across the pond. She's in England and the founder of Get Gorgeous, an online platform dedicated to inspiring and empowering women to great health and more vitality. Over 20 years, she has educated hundreds of women on the role of nutrition, movement, and a healthy mindset. A powerful combination of personal experience and industry background means that Adele is ideally placed to understand the needs of women looking for solace in their minds and gorgeous bodies. Adele's Get Gorgeous coaching has been described as thoughtful, practical, and actionable advice to ensure your weight will stay off for good and have optimal health for years to come. Welcome, Adele.
Thank you very much, Gayle. What a wonderful introduction.
Well, thank you for being with us. I know there's a big time difference, so hopefully this finds you well.
It does.
I know that you're a mother of three. You've had 3 cesareans, which is unusual. I've only had one. You're now 50, and you've been working in the field of health and fitness for 2 decades. And you love teaching Pilates and working as a women's health coach. Now, your book is #1 in both UK and Australia, but you said it's not doing as well in the US. So tell us a little bit about your book, what's in it. I don't know why it wouldn't be doing well here, but tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that's very kind. My book is called Gorgeous, How to Look and Feel Fantastic Every Day. It took years to put together, and I thought it was all going to be about nutrition. I thought the biggest thing everybody wants to hear about, I don't know about the USA, but in the UK, we have the low-fat debacle, as we call it. Everybody is trying to eat low-fat products, and it is causing big health problems here in the UK. And I know in America, you always seem to be a little bit quicker than us in picking up new ideas. But over here, it's still quite slow, and there's lots of products around. And I thought that the book would be purely about nutrition. But talking to my book coach, and she explained to me, would you rant at your clients? Would you tell them what to do? Or would you sit back and listen and be a little bit more empathetic? And I thought, yes, I'd probably be a little bit more empathetic, a little bit more caring. So the book is half about psychology and why we do things and the excuses that we make, a little bit about nutrition and a current science behind nutrition, and then there's a whole section on movement rather than exercise to keep us healthy and active into our 50s, 60s, and beyond.
Well, there are so many. In fact, somebody on TV here said that, it just said this morning, that as soon as you find out one thing that they tell you to do, then about either 5 years later comes out, it's not what you should be doing. And one of the hosts said, yeah, I think I'm just going to do carbs and sugar from now on, because what they tell you, it turns out it's not good. So you know that nutritionists are always changing their opinions almost weekly. So who can you trust?
Well, that is such a good point. Well, I would trust yourself. I would trust your instinct and your body. If you look back at Neolithical man, if you look at our ancestors and the way that they were eating and how fit and strong they were, of course, there was disease that killed them off really early and young in life. But in terms of their athleticism, they were perfect specimens. And if you look at any of the indigenous people, indigenous Americans and New Zealanders and Eskimos, Inuits, they've all got very, very different macro content in their body. So they would have proteins, carbs, and fats, but they would eat them very differently from the way that we do now. We tend to eat 60% carbohydrates, and the indigenous populations were only eating 20%, and they were harvesting fruit that wasn't as ripe as the food that we've got available for us now. So I think if we go back and trust our instincts and the way that our predecessors ate, I think that is a really good guide for the future. And I do hear you. It is so confusing, all the different headlines that come up and make things impossible to understand. So I hope and trust that my book has filtered through all the science. I've based it on lots and lots of references and made it a very, very simple, straightforward path.
So can they get your book on Amazon?
Yes, you can. If you just type in Gorgeous Adele Stickland, it's stick as in my figure, which isn't a stick, but there we go. Adele Stickland, you'll find Gorgeous, and yes, you can find it on Amazon.com. And I would be delighted if your listeners went along to Amazon and had a look.
That would be terrific. So what do you see as the pillars to great health?
I think there are at least 3, if not 4, pillars to great health. To me, movement rather than exercise, being really active every day. As a Pilates fanatic, I'm interested in biomechanics, and if you keep doing the same thing every day, like going to the gym 3 times a week, you're only using those same muscles. But if you're out walking, if you're out being really active in the outside, then you're much more likely to use different muscle groups, and it's much better for you. So movement rather than exercise is a key for me. Getting your heart rate going is obvious. We love to get that muscle working. Nutrition, obviously really important, that second pillar. And the third one, I would say, is mindset. Having that great mental capacity to be positive. I know it's a bit twee, and a lot of people say, positive mental health, but it is so important. And it can be as simple as gratitude. Just being grateful every day can make us feel so much better. There's an experiment that was carried out, and it was called, there's a couple that come to mind, but one in particular was a newspaper. And in the newspaper, the psychologist had 2 groups of people. They had an optimistic group of people and a pessimistic group of people. And they gave the same paper to both groups individually, and they asked them to count how many adverts were in the newspaper, and they timed them. And the pessimists came back in about 25 minutes. It took them 25 minutes to count all the adverts, and they found the answer. The optimists did exactly the same calculation, came up with the same calculation in 30 seconds. And the reason being, the reason being that the optimists saw on page 2 a description that said there are 27 adverts in this newspaper. And the optimists were looking wider than the mindset of that singular question. They were looking much, much bigger at the whole page. They noticed more things. And that experiment has been quantified so many times in psychological papers and things like that. So it's the optimists in life see more opportunity. They're much more likely to be more active and, be happy. So the 3 pillars that I would suggest are nutrition, movement, and optimism, mindset, but also sleep. I think sleep is very underrated, especially in our age group. We tend to believe that as we age, we need less sleep, which is not actually true. It's just that our circadian rhythm, the rhythm through the day, is slightly changed as we age, and we still need our 8 hours sleep, but we tend to get a little bit sleepy around about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And if we do fall asleep then we're going to mess up our circadian rhythm. So the rhythm changes, but we still need those 8 hours. And it's one of those extra pillars that I would add in to good health. Get a great night's sleep.
Wow, that's fantastic. Of course, the positive thinking, you're preaching to the choir here. I profess it all the time. I'm always talking about how it's important to think positively. So I agree with you there. But you also talk about some of the things for mental health. And I was laughing at one of them, I have to tell you. I know that you talk about mindfulness and discipline and so forth, but you talk about forest bathing. I don't know if we do that here in the States. So what is forest bathing?
Apparently, it's very, very famous in Japan. I'm a great proponent of it. I absolutely adore being outside. I live in Devon, which is the equivalent of Florida in America. It's where all the retired folk go. The weather's better. It's loads of outdoor activities. And forest bathing is basically getting outside and being amongst the trees, because the trees release these wonderful chemicals that make you feel good. It's the same as being at the sea. When you're at the sea and you feel the positive ions coming off the sea, it's that same chemical release that the trees produce that make you feel just great to be alive. And I think the cliche forest bathing has derived from that. So I'm glad it amused you, Gayle.
Well, but is it actually bathing in the forest, or
No, you don't have to lie down and roll around in the trees. No, in the leaves. It's just a matter of getting outside and being.
Okay. I feel
just
better
being
now.
amongst
I
them.
feel better now. Okay. All right. Now I know that you've covered sleeping, and I know that I used to sleep very well, and I still sleep well. I do find that I'm getting I go to bed a little earlier now, and sometimes I'm somewhere and my eyes will close, and I'm not used to doing that. So I think those are changing as I'm getting older. But one of the things that you talk about, and I know that this is key because, though this goes back to my years of teaching modeling and so forth, why posture is so important to your health.
Yeah, that's a really good point. With age comes the fear of osteoporosis. It is huge in my family. Both of my paternal and my maternal line have got severe osteoporosis, and posture creates that problem. And that's really sad, because if you're not using your posture, if you're not standing upright, then the body is incredibly efficient. And if you're not using something, then it depletes energy from there and it moves it somewhere else. So if you're slightly stooped, or if you push in your hip to one side, then the body will decide quite cleverly that you no longer need bone density in those areas. Osteoporosis is often linked with postural places like the upper thoracic, the upper back, and these are places that the bone starts to crumble because it's not being used. And that can be as easy as bad posture. So the other thing that you can do is correct your posture, standing upright, making that plumb line from your ear, shoulder, hip to ankle on the outside, but also muscle strength. As we age, we find it more difficult to synthesize protein, and therefore it's much more important that we up our protein, and protein is pushed into the muscle, and the muscle helps the bones and the skeletal structure to stay strong and upright. So for me, posture is vital, because we spend, especially our modern lifestyle, we spend so often leaning over a desk, reading on a computer, on a tablet, on our phones, hunched up. It creates a physical impact on your body. So it's one of those things that we could ignore, but only to our detriment. So I would ask everybody right now to pull their tummy muscles in, pull their shoulders back, and allow their respiratory system to work better, digestive system, circulatory system, and your immune system all works better when you have great posture.
That's wonderful, and I can attest to that. I mean, posture is really, really important, and one of the things that you're going to find, listeners, is that if you don't stand up straight, your tummy pooches out, and
Yes,
many of you have this poochy tummy, and you're thin, and you still
yes.
have this poochy tummy, and it's from not standing tall and straight. Now, there's
Yes.
another thing that you talk about, which is a Brit thing and not a US thing, and that's why you wouldn't eat porridge for breakfast. So I don't think there's too many of us here who eat porridge. So I'm not sure anybody even knows what porridge is. So
Oh, really?
yes, yes. So first of all, what is porridge?
Porridge is well, my mother is Scottish, and porridge is something that we were brought up on. Porridge is oats, and it's added to either milk, water, and my mum would have it with salt, which would make it really, really quite powerful. But a lot of people have it with honey or sugar, and it's basically rolled oats or overnight oats.
So
I
it's
think
like
is another.
oatmeal.
Yeah,
Oatmeal.
so it's like oatmeal. Yes, that's
Okay,
exactly
okay,
what
all
it is.
right.
Yeah.
Now we're on the same track here. Okay, and you say you wouldn't eat
Fantastic.
it for breakfast, yet people always say it's such a healthy thing to eat. And you talk about intermittent fasting, which seems to be a latest craze.
Yes.
And then you also say fats don't make you fat. So tell us a little bit about all of that.
Okay, well, that's quite a lot to cover. But intermittent fasting is something that is a craze over here as well. But as I say, it's taking its time to really filter through. And it goes back to how our ancestors ate. They wouldn't have eaten 8 meals a day. You know, the constant grazing that we fell into the trap of to keep our metabolism going has actually been disproved. You know, they've done experiments where they had people in a sealed laboratory, and there was no effect on their metabolism when they ate 8 meals a day or 3 meals a day. So that whole grazing throughout the day is a fallacy, hasn't happened. But intermittent fasting means, for me, is simply skipping breakfast. So if I delay my breakfast and I'll have my lunch and my dinner, then it just means that I'm getting enough to sustain me through the day and I feel comfortable. And as an instructor of over 20 years, a fitness instructor, I was terrified when I first started because I kept thinking I'm going to get tired, I'm not going to be able to maintain my energy. But if you are eating lots of carbohydrates in your diet, i.e. porridge for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch and then pasta or potatoes for tea, then you're on this hunger cycle, this glucose cycle of constantly needing to eat. But if you shift your body into eating more proteins and fats, then your body starts to produce ketone bodies and you don't have that hunger cycle. You're much more stable throughout the day. And therefore, when you've got that balance right, you can intermittently fast beautifully. It is not a problem. And this goes back to, who do you trust? Trust yourself. If you try it and you feel dizzy, then you've got to go back and look at what you're eating. If you're feeling hungry, go back and have a look at what you're eating. There are apps, there are things out there that will help you to monitor just how much glucose that you're taking in, and you tweak it according to how you feel.
So what happened to that saying that was breakfast is the most important meal of the day?
I know. Do you know who came up with that phrase?
I would think
Mr.
maybe it's Wheaties Breakfast of Champions.
Yeah, it was Mr. Kellogg's.
Okay, Kellogg. Okay, all
Mr.
right.
Kellogg's came up with the idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and that has been qualified. He came up with that phrase, and I wonder why he came up with that phrase.
Wow, wow, amazing.
Marketing. It was
Yeah,
pure marketing.
exactly.
And it
But
just comes into the fabric of our lives, and we tell our kids, and we bring our kids up in the same way. Most important part of the day. Well, I would put a caveat to that. The research proves that children do need breakfast for their cognitive function. In order to be academic at school, to pick things up, they do need breakfast. But adults, and especially senior adults, they just don't need it in the same way.
what about the fats? You say fats don't make you fat.
I know. Well, this was the big myth, the big cholesterol myth. And this came because of your most beloved president. I presume it is your most beloved, but Eisenhower. He had 2 heart attacks whilst he was president, and it caused a big worry in the medical profession, and where everybody was scrambling to find out the answers. The fact that he drank and smoked, not the issue. They looked at his fat, and they did a 7-country study. Ansel Keys came up with this study, and he looked at these 7 countries, and he came to the decision that fats were making us fat. They looked at Japan, who had less heart attacks, and therefore that was the basis of 50 years of the latest hypothesis, the healthy heart hypothesis. Fat makes you fat. And that whole hypothesis has been disputed by so many modern writers and analysts and researchers, but because it's in the fabric of our society, it is taking a long time to unpick. But there are wonderful writers. Gary Tobes is very, very famous for writing about this. My all-time favorite is Nina Teicholz, because she's been so systematic. She's gone through all of the research in the last 50 years and managed to overturn it. So I reference all of these research papers and books in my book. It's a really important subject. We're all a little bit scared, but I promise if you go back through the research, it has been done and it has been proven. The other thing that the charming Ansel Keys, he was very, very charismatic, but he only looked at 7 countries. And he missed out the biggest countries in Europe that are fat consuming, which is France and Germany. And modern research has shown us that, they had significantly less heart attacks in the same time frame, but it was ignored. It was removed from the research. And the countries that he was comparing to, like Japan, didn't have high heart attacks, but they had extremely high strokes. So it's only in the fruition of time that we can look back and actually see what has happened over the last 50 years. And it's people working in the best interests, but it's just got a little bit skewed and a little bit, it's become part of everything that we do. And it just takes a little while to unpick what's happened in the last 50 years.
Wow. Well, as we kind of wrap up, what is the one big thing that people can do right now to improve their health?
I would start really, really simple. Getting more movement, doing a little bit of forest bathing because you like that. But also, I think drinking water. Drinking water, getting your water going would be a fantastic way to kickstart your life. And if you are intermittent fasting, you need to get rid of all the toxins in the body. So you do need, to be upping your water. So before you start doing anything crazy, just concentrate on the old H2O. Get water, 2 litres a day, which is 5 to 8 glasses of water, around about 250 ml. So it's not that big, but I would start off with something simple. I would embed that habit, and then I would move on to another habit.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about, again, how people can get in touch with you, Adele. If they go to Amazon, they can find your book, Get Gorgeous, right? Is that the name of the book?
Well, it's called, my website is get-gorgeous.com.
Okay, so if you want to reach Adele, it's get-gorgeous.com. Okay.
And the book on Amazon is called Gorgeous, How to Look and Feel Fantastic Every Day. And it's Adele Stickland. Stick like my figure. Luckily, you can't see.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Stickland, Stickland. And it's Adele, Adele. So
that's right.
Adele, Perfect. This has been absolutely delightful. I know that our audience needs to hear from people like you who can kind of set them straight as to what they need to do and how to do it. So I want to thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully that your book will get up to #1 in the
That
U.S.
would
as
be
well.
wonderful.
Let's all hope for that, folks. Go out to Amazon and get and find her book, Gorgeous, and Adele Stickland. And let's see
Thank you,
what we can do
Gayle.
for Adele. Okay.
You're an angel. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adele.